Lena had always been the kind of person who pushed boundaries, maybe too much. As a child, she was the one who climbed trees higher than anyone dared, the one who tore apart her toys to see how they worked, the one who stayed up late reading books about alternate realities and the far reaches of the universe. It was no surprise, then, that when the opportunity to experiment with gene modification presented itself, she dove in headfirst. The idea was simple enough: alter her genetic code to give her the ability to jump between dimensions. Imagine the possibilities: different worlds, untapped knowledge, and the thrill of exploring realities beyond her own. It was the stuff of science fiction, and Lena had never been one to shy away from turning fiction into reality. What Lena didn't count on, however, was the sheer chaos of it all. Her first jump had been a disaster. She had landed right in the middle of a war between sentient plants and giant, three-eyed slugs. It had been surreal, but at least the slugs weren't all that hostile. After all, she was technically on their side, given that she was trapped between them and the rampaging vines. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was that when she made the jump, she inadvertently left behind a gaping tear in the fabric of space-time, a dimensional rift, as the more experienced travelers called it. At first, she thought it was a minor glitch, like a hiccup in the system. But no, it was far worse. Every time she jumped into a new world, the rift followed, growing larger, threatening to collapse the very dimensions she was so eager to explore. "You're a walking disaster, you know that?" Kairos had said, chuckling in his usual enigmatic manner. Lena hated how right he was. The opening scene that unfolded now, on the edge of a new world, was more absurd than anything she'd imagined. The rift behind her was now the size of a car, a crack in reality, visible as a shimmering distortion in the air. She'd jumped into a dimension where cats ruled the world. Literal cats. And not the kind of cats that laze around on windowsills. No, these were intelligent, 4-foot-tall cats, walking on two legs, wearing regal cloaks and crowns. They had the audacity to call themselves the sovereign felines of the fifth realm. Lena, in her haste to get away from the rift, had managed to land right in the middle of the royal palace courtyard. As she tried to back away from the towering, judgmental eyes of the feline court, she was unceremoniously scooped up by the largest cat, a majestic tabby who appeared to be the ruler. "You've committed a grave offense, human," the cat king boomed, his voice deep and commanding. "Our kingdom is not to be tainted by your kind." Lena blinked, unable to formulate a proper response. She had never, in all her research into alternate dimensions, imagined that she would land in a world where cats ran the show. She'd hoped for thrilling alien landscapes or utopian societies, not this absurdity. She squirmed in the feline king's grasp, trying not to be choked by his surprisingly strong paws. I didn't mean to offend," she stammered, hoping that whatever magic or science was responsible for this place would make the king understand. But of course, the king didn't care. This wasn't about understanding, this was about pride. "Throw her in the dungeon." The king gestured dramatically with his paw, and two burly feline guards rushed over. "No, no, wait." Lena pleaded, her mind racing. "This wasn't part of the plan. I am not supposed to be here. I was just, passing through, and the rift. The king's eyes narrowed. "You dare speak of the forbidden rift? That tear in the fabric of our existence?" He bared his teeth. "Do you not understand the harm you've caused?" Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She was so caught up in trying to escape her ridiculous situation that she hadn't even considered the consequences of her actions on this world. I can fix it," she blurted, already knowing that was a lie. How could she possibly fix a rift in the fabric of reality? The king's ears twitched in interest. "Fix it?" He leaned closer, inspecting her. "What kind of human are you?" "A very confused one," Lena muttered under her breath, but the king heard her. "Take her to the High Council," the king commanded. "If she's truly capable of closing the rift, we will use her. If not, she shall remain in our care." Lena could barely breathe as she was escorted by two large cats to the High Council. She was thinking fast. If she didn't find a way to fix this world, like so many others she'd visited, could be lost forever. But more pressing than that was the fact that she was about to face an entire council of self-important cats who looked at her as if she were a mere pet. The council chamber was enormous, with high, vaulted ceilings and marble floors that gleamed in the dim light. At the far end of the room sat a series of thrones, each one occupied by an even more impressive-looking cat than the last. One was sleek and black, wearing an ornate golden necklace. Another was a massive, white-furred Persian with an air of utter disdain. A third, a calico, was napping on her throne, completely uninterested in the proceedings. The head of the council, an elderly tabby with a long, graying beard, gave her a scrutinizing look as she was pushed forward. "Speak, human," he said in a voice that oozed authority. "What is this rift you speak of?" Lena felt her mouth go dry. I don't fully understand it myself. But I've been jumping between dimensions, and every time I do, I leave a rift behind." There was a collective gasp among the council, and the calico finally opened one eye. "A rift?" the elderly tabby said, leaning forward. "You speak of dimensional chaos?" Lena nodded, biting her lip. "Yes. And I need to fix it. I can't just leave it open." There was a tense silence as the council exchanged glances. Lena could almost see the wheels turning in their feline minds. Finally, the head of the council nodded. "Very well," he said, sounding slightly amused. "If you truly wish to redeem yourself, we will assist you. But understand this, should you fail, the consequences will be dire." Lena gulped. The pressure was on. Meanwhile, back in her home dimension, the crack in reality grew wider. Lena could feel it, like a weight pressing down on her chest. She couldn't leave this world until the rift was sealed. But how? As she stood in the center of the council chamber, preparing to make her plea for help, Lena couldn't help but feel like she was out of her depth. The idea of fixing a rift, a tear in reality, seemed impossible. But she had to try. If not for herself, then for every world that might be at risk because of her actions. "We will provide the tools you need," the council leader said. "But first, we must understand the source of this rift." Lena blinked. "The source?" The tabby's eyes glinted. "Yes. The rift didn't just appear because of your dimensional travels. It was triggered by something much older, much darker. It is a force beyond your comprehension." Lena's heart raced. What was he talking about? What kind of force could manipulate something as fundamental as the fabric of reality? And why hadn't she noticed it before? Her mind spun as the council began to lay out a plan. The real adventure was just beginning. The chamber was heavy with tension, the air thick with the weight of unspoken words. Lena couldn't shake the sense that something was amiss, that she was on the edge of a much bigger, much darker mystery than she'd anticipated. The cats of the High Council had retreated into quiet deliberation, their eyes fixed on her like predators sizing up their prey. And yet, none of them spoke. Finally, the elderly tabby broke the silence. "The rift," he began, his voice low, "is not something we have the power to close alone. It was not created by mere accident. A force beyond your understanding is pulling at the very fabric of existence." Lena's stomach twisted. She'd always been a logical person. Science had explained everything to her up until this point, until she crossed the dimensional line. Now, she was faced with something she couldn't explain, and it frightened her more than anything. "What kind of force?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The tabby's eyes glowed like embers as he locked his gaze on hers. "There are travelers, beings who wander the space between worlds. Some are innocent, like you, and some are not. But there is one, a rogue traveler, who has been tearing through dimensions, creating rifts in his wake. He has broken the natural order, destabilizing entire worlds for his own twisted gain." Lena's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. A rogue traveler? Someone else was doing this? But how could he have known where she'd be? Is he the reason the rift appeared when I jumped? She asked. Most likely, the tabby replied. The energy you release when you jump between dimensions weakens the barriers between worlds, but it's the rogue who exploits those weaknesses, opening the rifts deliberately. He is far more dangerous than you can imagine. Lena's hand shook as she clasped it tightly around the strap of her bag. She wanted answers, but it felt like she was getting more questions with every moment. One of the other cats, a sleek, gray Persian with piercing green eyes, leaned forward, her expression unreadable. If you wish to stop the rift, you must find the rogue. Only then will you be able to close the damage he has caused. But be warned, child, he is far more dangerous than any dimension you've traversed. And he will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Lena's head swam. The rogue had been creating these rifts on purpose, using them to tear apart the boundaries between dimensions. What did he want? Power? Control? Or was there something more to his motives? Whatever it was, she couldn't ignore the implications. Every world she'd visited, every rift she'd left behind, could be at risk of falling apart. And it was her fault. I'll find him, Lena said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. She wasn't sure how, but she knew she couldn't let this continue. Not after everything she'd seen, the tabby nodded. Then you must go to the Nexus. Lena blinked. The Nexus? What's that? The gray Persian meowed softly. The Nexus is where all dimensions meet. It's the center of the multiverse, the place where the threads of reality converge. The rogue traveler is likely hiding there, using the chaotic energy of the place to mask his presence. Lena had heard of the Nexus. Every theorist who'd ever studied alternate realities had speculated about it. Some thought it was just a legend. Others believed it was the true origin of all dimensions. But to actually go there, it sounded impossible. Dangerous. I'll need help, Lena said, trying to steady her racing heart. I can't do this alone. The tabby paused, as if considering her words. Then he gave a single, deliberate nod. You will need a guide. There is one who can show you the way. A traveler, like you, though much older and wiser. He can help you navigate the Nexus. And where do I find him? Lena asked, hope flickering in her chest. His name is Kairos, the tabby said, his tone now almost reverent. He has seen more dimensions than any of us. But be warned, he is not always reliable. He may not offer his help willingly. Lena's stomach clenched. She had no idea how she was supposed to find someone like that. But if she wanted to stop the rogue traveler, she had no choice but to try. I'll find him, she said again, her voice stronger this time, even if she wasn't sure how. Lena's journey to find Kairos took her through 2 more dimensions. The first world was a barren wasteland of endless deserts and storms, where the sky was perpetually dark, and the winds howled like creatures trapped in eternal torment. She didn't stay long. The second dimension was an underwater city where the air smelled faintly of salt and brine, and the citizens were strange, bioluminescent beings that communicated through light and color rather than words. But neither of these worlds had a trace of the elusive traveler she was looking for. Frustration gnawed at her as she jumped from one place to another, searching, always searching. She'd left more rifts in her wake, and each one was a reminder of how her actions had consequences. Each world she left behind felt more fragile than the last, and she wasn't sure how many more she could visit before everything started to crumble. But the more she traveled, the more she realized something. The rifts weren't just a side effect of her jumps anymore, they were her responsibility. And she couldn't let them continue to grow unchecked. After what felt like an eternity, Lena arrived in a world where the sky was painted in shades of violet and gold, and the trees stretched to impossibly high heights, their branches thick with glowing fruit. The world was peaceful, too peaceful, and it unnerved her. There was no sign of the rogue traveler, but something about this place felt different. The air hummed with energy, as though it had been waiting for her. It was here, in the heart of this strange, silent world, that she finally found him. Kairos was standing at the edge of a massive, shimmering lake, his back to her. He was tall, his dark hair falling in waves down to his shoulders, and his clothes seemed to shift with the colors of the environment around him. He didn't turn as she approached, but she could feel his awareness of her, as if he had been waiting for her all along. "You're late," he said, his voice calm, though there was a sharpness beneath it that made her pause. Lena took a deep breath, steeling herself for the encounter. "I need your help," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the weight of her request. Kairos finally turned to face her, his gaze piercing. He studied her for a moment, as though deciding whether to take her seriously. "And why would I help you?" he asked, his tone amused. "I don't have a choice," Lena said, holding his gaze. "The rifts are getting worse, and there's someone out there who's making it worse. I need to stop him before it's too late." Kairos raised an eyebrow, as if intrigued. "A rogue traveler?" he asked, his expression shifting. "I've been following his trail for some time now. He's dangerous, but I'm afraid it's not that simple. If you're truly determined to stop him, then you'll have to do more than simply close the rifts. You'll have to confront him directly, and that's something even I may not be able to help you with." Lena felt a knot tighten in her chest. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing the doubt in Kairos's voice made her feel more vulnerable than she cared to admit. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Kairos's expression softened slightly. "There's a place, deep within the Nexus, where the threads of reality are woven. If you can find it, you may be able to stop him. But it won't be simple. The Nexus is dangerous, a place where even the most experienced travelers can lose themselves." Lena swallowed. She was scared, more scared than she'd been since the first time she'd jumped between dimensions. But she knew what had to be done. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. Kairos nodded, his eyes calculating. "Then let's begin. You'll need to be prepared. The Nexus is unlike anything you've encountered before." With that, they set off together, leaving the serene, violet world behind. The true adventure was only just beginning. Lena followed Kairos through the shimmering expanse of the Nexus, the place where every dimension converged into a chaotic, tangled mess. The air seemed to pulse with raw energy, thick with the potential of countless worlds colliding, merging, and fracturing. The ground beneath her feet felt unstable, as if it might give way at any moment, throwing her into the void. But the strangest part was the silence. Despite the crackling energy, the Nexus itself was eerily still, like the calm before a storm. As they walked, the world around them shifted constantly. One moment, the landscape was a sprawling forest of giant, translucent trees, their branches stretching impossibly high. The next, they were standing on a vast ocean of liquid glass, the horizon shimmering with strange, fleeting colors. Every step they took seemed to change the environment around them, like walking through the very fabric of reality itself. Kairos walked ahead with a purposeful stride, unbothered by the shifting landscapes. His presence was calm, controlled, as if he had walked this way 1,000 times before. But for Lena, every step was a struggle. She had to keep her bearings, focus on the path ahead, and try not to lose herself in the ever-changing scenery. "You must keep your mind focused," Kairos said, his voice cutting through the stillness. "The Nexus will try to pull you in different directions, to confuse you. If you lose your focus, you'll be lost forever, drifting between dimensions with no way to return." Lena nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. She was scared. The Nexus wasn't just another dimension, it was a place of infinite possibilities, where even time didn't always make sense. She had no idea what they would encounter here, but she had to trust Kairos. He was the only one who seemed to know what he was doing, even if he was as cryptic as ever. After what felt like hours, they reached the center of the Nexus. It wasn't a physical place, but a swirling vortex of energy, constantly shifting, its colors and shapes too erratic to comprehend. At the heart of this maelstrom was a glowing orb, its surface rippling like water, but with a strange, metallic sheen. The orb pulsed with a steady rhythm, as if it were the very heartbeat of the multiverse itself. "This is the weave," Caro said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is where the threads of reality are spun. The rogue traveler is hiding somewhere in this chaos, manipulating the strands of existence to tear apart the boundaries between worlds. If you want to stop him, you have to find him here, before it's too late." Lena felt a shiver run down her spine as she looked at the orb. The air around it was thick with the energy of countless realities, and she could almost hear the whispers of those worlds, lost and fragmented. She knew that whatever they were about to do, it would be dangerous. There was no turning back now. "How do we find him?" Lena asked, her voice tight with apprehension. Karos turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We don't. He will find us." Before Lena could respond, the orb flared with blinding light, and the ground beneath them trembled. A sound like 1,000 voices crying out in pain filled the air, and the very fabric of the nexus seemed to warp and twist. The world around them collapsed into darkness, and Lena felt herself falling, her body weightless as if she were being sucked into a vortex. In that moment, everything changed. When Lena's feet hit the ground again, she was no longer in the nexus. She was in a different world entirely. The landscape was a desolate wasteland, the sky above churning with dark clouds, and the air thick with the scent of decay. The ground was cracked and uneven, as if the very earth had been torn apart by some catastrophic force. In the distance, Lena could make out the silhouette of a crumbling city, its towers bent and twisted as though they were caught in some sort of gravitational pull. "Where are we?" Lena asked, her voice shaking as she surveyed the ruined landscape. "This is the rogue's doing," Caro said, his voice hard. "He has been tearing through dimensions, leaving destruction in his wake. This world is his playground now." Lena's heart raced as she looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. The rogue traveler had destroyed this world, just as he was threatening to do with countless others. And now, they were standing in the middle of the devastation he had caused. "We have to stop him before he can do more damage," Lena said, determination hardening her voice. Karos gave her a long, searching look. "The rogue is more than just a wanderer. He seeks to unravel the very fabric of reality itself. His plan is to collapse all dimensions into one, to rewrite the multiverse according to his will. If we don't stop him now, everything will be lost." Lena clenched her fists, her resolve strengthening. She had caused the rifts, yes, but she was going to fix them. She wasn't going to let this rogue tear everything apart. They began to move toward the city, their steps heavy in the stillness. The air around them seemed charged with an eerie energy, and every step felt like a challenge, as if the very world was trying to push them back. Lena's mind raced with possibilities, trying to think of a plan, any plan, to confront the rogue. But Karos was silent, his expression grim as he led the way. When they reached the heart of the city, Lena could feel it. The energy in the air was thick, almost tangible, and the sense of something terrible waiting just around the corner was overwhelming. She glanced at Karos, who nodded slightly, indicating that the rogue was close. The rogue was standing in the middle of a vast plaza, his back to them. He was tall, dressed in dark robes that billowed around him as if they were alive, and his face was hidden behind a mask of shifting, indeterminate features. The air around him rippled, distorting the very space itself. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she saw him. This was the one responsible for the rifts, the one who had caused the chaos she'd been trying to fix. The rogue turned slowly, as if he had been expecting them all along. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his voice, when he spoke, was smooth and cold. "So, you've come to stop me." Lena stood her ground, her fists clenched. "We won't let you destroy everything." The rogue's lips curled into a smile, though it was unsettling, like a snake preparing to strike. "You think you can stop me? You, a mere traveler, and you," he gestured to Karos, who has long since forgotten the true power of the Nexus. "You are both out of your depth." Lena's heart pounded as she faced the rogue. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She had no idea how she was going to defeat him, but she knew she couldn't back down now. The rogue raised his hand, and the world around them began to bend and twist, the fabric of reality itself warping under his control. Kairos stepped forward, his voice steady. "You've made a mistake, rogue. The Nexus is not your playground. You cannot control it as you think you can." The rogue laughed, a sound that sent chills down Lena's spine. "You think you understand the Nexus? You think you can stop me? I have already won." But Lena wasn't listening. Her mind was working quickly, trying to find a way to counter the rogue's power. The Nexus was unstable, chaotic, but it wasn't completely beyond her control. She had already caused rifts in reality. Maybe, just maybe, she could use that to her advantage. With a sudden burst of energy, Lena raised her hand and released a wave of force that rippled through the air. The rogue's power faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Kairos seized the opportunity, drawing on his knowledge of the Nexus to weaken the rogue's hold over the fabric of reality. The rogue's expression shifted from amusement to fury as the world around him began to fracture. "No," he shouted. "You can't," but it was too late. The energy that Lena had unleashed collided with the rogue's power, shattering the barrier between dimensions. The rogue screamed as he was sucked into the vortex, his form disintegrating into the very fabric of the multiverse. Lena collapsed to her knees, exhausted. The rift had been closed, the rogue stopped, but the cost was high. The Nexus was collapsing, the energy of countless worlds swirling around them, threatening to pull them in. "We have to go," Kairos said urgently, grabbing Lena's arm. "The Nexus is destabilizing. If we stay too long, we'll be trapped here forever." Lena nodded weakly, and together they made their way back to the center of the Nexus. As they moved, the world around them continued to crumble, but Lena could feel the rifts closing, the balance of reality slowly being restored. When they finally returned to her home dimension, the rift behind them was gone. The world was safe, for now, but as she looked back at Kairos, Lena knew that the battle wasn't over. There would always be more to fix, more worlds to protect. And she would be ready for whatever came next.